If you tell people you can just roll it in the room, it takes 45 minutes to unpack, and then you can start doing your scans, they just don't believe it. Talk to the customers early, I think, is number one. I cannot say this often enough. Early, often, and repeatedly. If you can put a toaster, you can put our device.
Welcome back to another episode of the GS MedTech podcast, where I speak with industry leaders shaping the future of MedTech. I'm Medarski, and today we're exploring the role of brain PET imaging in diagnosing and understanding neurodegenerative diseases. My guest is Jannis Fischer, CEO and co-founder of Positrigo, a company redefining brain imaging with compact, dedicated PET systems designed to make high-quality neuroimaging accessible to clinics and hospitals around the world. Jannis, pleasure to have you with me today.
Hello.
So obviously we know each other for quite a while, but it's always useful to get a little bit of a background so that we can set the scenes to everybody that's listening to this. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. So I start way back when I was just finishing high school, because the next thing I did was actually work in a home for people with dementia. So 21 patients there. And you will soon know why this is relevant also for today's discussion. So I had first-hand experience caring for various stages of dementia patients. Then fast forward, I did my studies. I studied physics. Would never think that I end up in medical devices, closely related to medical. But as it turns out, the circle closes when I was doing my PhD at ETH Zurich, and we were working on a small animal research device with some doctors from the university hospital. And about 1 year into that project, they came to us with a great idea, which was, in the vision, Alzheimer drugs are going to become available. And once they do, we need a lot of brain imaging capacity, which in no way can be dealt with the existing whole body systems that are out there. And there is a technology called positron emission tomography, or short PET, which makes visible the plaques that are associated with the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And you can see those with PET. And so we started first as a little project, doing some prototyping in the lab. Then in 2020, we went into Positrigo, the company, and commercialized this technology. And now here we are, having a very small dedicated brain PET system that can do the same or even slightly better images than the state of the art, for a much lower price, much more accessible. And we have now onboarded with the vision to image everyone, make it much better accessible to everyone to actually get the scan and eventually get treated in Alzheimer's, but also other diseases.
Amazing. Thank you for that story. And you have a co-founder, Max Ludwig-Ahnen.
Yes, I do.
Did you work with him on the PhD, and that's how you've actually met him and started the project?
We were actually neighbors in the institute. So we brought together, we didn't work on the same project. So I was working on the small animal system, and he was working on a gamma ray astronomy experiment. So much larger scale. And then our advisor actually brought us together, because when it became evident that we should put this into a spin-off company, he partnered up. And since then we have been working together very successfully to make this actually come true.
Amazing. So I'm very curious to know, obviously you had this idea, and then it's evolved in a fully fledged product. Can you please talk to us a little bit of the development from concept to a product?
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned already, the idea was born in this collaboration between deep tech, physics, medical applications, biological research. And as soon as this was conceived and we were clear that we want to make a clinical product that actually gets rolled out to serve doctors and their patients, and we very quickly went and asked a lot of doctors what they would actually like to see in such a device. So the first step was actually to vet and check and get validated what we think the market would want to see once we have a finished product. And this actually has been proven extremely helpful, because it enabled us to design and tailor the product really to what the market wants to see, the doctors want to see, and the doctors need to treat their patients. And so then from that, it was a tough journey, because in medical devices, you are faced with a lot of requirements and regulatory hurdles, and sometimes also uncertainty, especially in Europe, where the regulation changed just in that time. And so by very diligently working on that, we managed to, within 4.5 years, to get from this concept in the lab prototype that was fully working from ETH, we reinvented that as a medical device and brought it to FDA clearance and CE mark in 4.5 years, which required a lot of engineering.
I can only imagine. So maybe to dig a little bit deeper into the technology, and you've already mentioned PET imaging, but maybe for listeners unfamiliar with PET imaging, can you please describe the technology in simple terms? And then to add to that why brain dedicated imaging is
Yes,
important and it
with
matters
pleasure,
now.
with pleasure. PET imaging stands for positron emission tomography. And that sounds very complicated. And how it essentially works is you inject a radioactively labeled molecule, a radio tracer, as you call it. And it can be something as simple as glucose, so sugar. And what you do is you measure basically the radiation coming out of this tracer. And then you can calculate how, in that example, the glucose is distributed. And this allows you to conclude biological properties. For example, if you have a high glucose consumption in a spot, that's a sign for tumor metastasis or tumor growing because it needs a lot of sugar to grow. Or if you in the brain have regions that have actually much less sugar consumption than the other regions, that is a sign for brain damage because damaged tissue will consume less energy. And now you can expand this methodology to other molecules than sugar. For example, there are tracers specific to the plaques that are causing Alzheimer, which with those new medications you can remove. And if you do that, if you inject this radio tracer that binds to those plaques, you can make a 3D distribution on how it is in the brain, which is then needed to confirm diagnosis, initiate treatment. And there are other applications like there, you can trace amino acids in brain tumors or dopamine in Parkinson's. So basically, it's the difference to MRI and CT, which are the other well-known modalities, is that you actually measure biological function, whereas in the other two, you actually measure anatomy, which comes later, right? If your brain anatomy changes, it's much more progressed than if you measure the processes that cause the change.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm assuming for patients, the benefit is that with PET imaging on the brain, they get diagnosis much earlier.
Yes. So the key to any effective disease treatment is that you diagnose early and precisely. And this seems like a very simple message, but it's actually not yet the standard everywhere. And so what we are going to, or what we are doing with our device is making this accessible to a much larger population than before. In Alzheimer's disease. And I'll give you an example of one of our first installations, which is in San Diego area in the neuron clinic. And they are the first neurology office to adopt this brain PET imaging in-house. And when I was there on October 24th when they scanned the first 4 patients. And the doctors were absolutely flashed by the idea that the patient was still sitting there and they could already look at the images. Whereas before, there was a 1 to 3 months wait time to refer the patient to an imaging center, get them scheduled, get the images back. And so one of their main KPIs is actually time to treatment. And so reducing this by several months is actually a game changer in the field. It decentralizes and personalizes the medicine in a way and also gathers it all in one place. So you have diagnostics to treatment, everything in this neurology office.
It's amazing. So was this clinical feedback received even in early development of the product or after you've actually started the initial installations?
The feedback overall from the very beginning was excellent. So we had this lab-built prototype that we actually scanned 10 patients on back in 2020. And their initial feedback was, it's great that the patient actually can sit and doesn't have to lie. It helps a lot with claustrophobic patients, which many are if they're in the stage of mild cognitive impairment or even Alzheimer's. Also with the elderly that sometimes are movement restricted, the seating position helps. And in terms of image quality, our design target was to be at or a little bit above the state of the art, and this we have achieved. So the feedback on the images is very good. We have never had pushback on that, and that of course makes us very proud because it basically for all brain applications you can directly use our machine and don't have to wait or have to count on the capacity of the whole body system, which is well used by indications like oncology, prostate, cardiac applications where you actually need the whole body device.
So obviously you've mentioned a couple of unique and benefits that are just solely exclusive to Positrigo, I'm assuming, and your product. But if you can wrap this up, what makes your approach to PET imaging unique or disruptive?
The fact that you can put it in almost any room, any office, that in the broadest sense possible, everybody can adopt PET imaging. It makes it just accessible to so many more patients and doctors.
Amazing. And were there any scientific breakthroughs or research that helped you to enable your technology, or was it all developed in-house?
It was a combination of both. We have my background is in particle physics, and I spent my PhD time mostly at CERN in Geneva. And a lot of the design that we did was inspired by those particle physics experiments, which often have a similar challenge. It's a very confined space. You need to really drill down, and you have to build very reliable, high quality systems, both electronically, mechanically, and software-wise. And so taking that concept and putting it into medical device helped us a lot and guided us a lot in making this product so high quality and so reliable as it is. We have other inventions that we patented also that are in the device in terms of algorithms and also electronics. And I want to highlight one thing that we licensed from University of Heidelberg. So our CTO, Dr. Ilaria Sacco, was part of a project that developed a microchip that digitizes the signals. And this is a huge advantage we have in the field, that we can actually use this chip, can produce it ourselves, and could even upgrade it if we wanted to. And this is a core piece of making it so small, so reliable, and so high-tech.
Amazing. And in my research and reading a little bit more around PET imaging, it seems like it's increasingly tied to quantitative biomarkers as well. And I'm assuming that means integrating software and AI to support precision diagnostics.
Yes.
Are you incorporating that yourself as well?
That is an excellent question. So we have always the system was built to be as compatible as possible to everything that's out there. And there's a lot of software out there that can do post-processing analysis, quantitative scoring of the images that come out. And I'm very proud to say that the system has passed a lot of tests, also standardized tests for this compatibility. So the doctors in the US frequently use a tool to quantify the Alzheimer amyloid score in a system called Centiloid, which gives you a number that you then can compare to a threshold in order to assess how big is the burden of the plaque in the brain that is then removed by the drugs. We are also on our roadmap having software tools or parts of the software that will enhance images by certain algorithms or AI processes to denoise and make the image quality even better with the same data.
Amazing. That's very good to know as well. Getting on to regulatory processes, and you've mentioned, and I believe you're the first product that's both FDA approved and CE marked. And you've mentioned a little bit of the struggles and the fact that you kind of got yourself involved in CE marking in the midst of everything that was happening in Europe with MDR. But if you are to reflect on that process, what are the biggest challenges that you've got to get there? And what's next after that on your regulatory roadmap?
The biggest challenge is to understand the requirements early. As with many things, it's easier if you start early when you don't really think you need it. And so we were quite prudent on ourselves that we were following regulatory processes and quality management system establishment as one of the first things we did. Our first employee was a quality manager to deal with those things. And I would say this has helped a lot in keeping this very strict timeline, which 4.5 years to market for medical device class 2 is extremely fast compared to what others do in the field with the same requirement. Now, talking a bit about FDA versus CE mark, so we decided in the beginning that we will aim for MDR for the CE mark, because that's the long-term right thing to do. And the biggest challenge there was that in the beginning, neither we nor the consultants nor the notified bodies knew on how to assess. And so it was a bit walking in the dark, and we were lucky to have very good advisors on that. We were also have a very renowned notified body, TÜV Süd, and working together with them on providing and getting the documentation and data needed to go through that process was of the essence, while not overdoing it at the same time. Switching to the US, we got FDA clearance 3 months earlier than CE mark, although we started the process 2 years later.
Yeah, that's the story that I repetitively hear nowadays, to be honest.
Which is a bit unfair also to say. I mean, it goes to the general trend. The unfairness lies in the fact that, of course, many documents we had to produce for CE mark also helped us in streamlining the FDA process. That being said, the FDA, I think the huge advantage the FDA has is actually twofold. One is the criteria are very clearly laid out in guidelines on what you have to deliver. And second, they encourage you to talk to them early on. And actually, if there are any unclarities on that, you can talk to them and can assess what's the right thing to do, which is actually something that is not even allowed in Europe. So the notified bodies are not allowed to consult, which makes it harder to be on spot, on target.
But I'm glad to say that the prolonged period is something that is less frequently mentioned nowadays. There are still many things to iron out in MDR, but it feels like, at least from a availability of notified bodies and their availability to start on projects and to quickly react with projects, is a little bit better than when you've done it. But again, credit to you and everything that you've set up and in the way that you've managed it to successfully obtain that.
I fully agree. Back then, it was very hard to even find a notified body. This also, I mean, we have one, we're happy with them. Looking for one now seems to be easier than it used to be.
Yeah. So you've touched already upon some early clinicians' feedback, but I would like you to go back to it and obviously just share with us, on top of the fact that they were surprised that they can get the scans very quickly compared to other modalities and other tools that would have needed to wait months for it. What other early feedback have you received from clinicians when they were evaluating, or when they're evaluating your system at the moment?
Everybody that has touched and used the system is extremely happy. So, of course, we have always suggestions on what can be improved, and rightfully so. There was no fundamental criticism, nothing that would prevent anybody from not using the system, which makes our life in the end quite easy, because the only thing we have to show or discuss with the client is that they have enough patience to make sense to have the device.
Yeah.
Image quality as such, usage of the device, both for the clinician as well for the patient, interpretation of images, all of those aspects have been very well designed, are well received by the doctors and the techs that use the device.
So that's it means that you've done the job right the first time and you've listened to their feedback to begin with.
I was going to say, I think the key to that is, and many people tell you, and it's a hard thing to do, is go out early and challenge yourself.
Yeah.
Because we as engineers, we as tech people, we are in love with our product, and rightfully so. Right? It's a great product. And there's many great products. It doesn't mean anybody is willing to pay money for it. And that's something we took into account in the design phase already, cutting out what's not needed, putting in what is requested. And the only thing you can do is talk to many potential clients in the beginning, get their feedback, write it down consistently, implement it, get LOIs from them, and do a basically customer centricity from the beginning. I mean, you are working with people a lot also, so it's all about your customers, and you have to embed this in the DNA of the company already in the engineering phase.
You're absolutely right. If you don't listen to the feedback of the end user and the customer, I mean, as you rightly point out, engineers like yourself, brilliant minds to build a product, but then if you don't necessarily listen to the feedback, sometimes there is a mismatch between what's the end result and what needs to be.
There's a lot of danger there.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm talking about, obviously, the pushbacks. Are there any misconceptions that you still have to overcome when you're speaking with neurologists and hospitals that are considering dedicated PET for the first time?
Yes. I mean, there are many questions that potential customers and clients have. The answer to that is we have the data to convince them. So if somebody brings up the question of image quality, we have the images, the data to show them. We have the other KOLs that have used the machines already, the customers that already have done hundreds of scans, that can talk to the others and give them comfort on what to expect with the device. And of course, it's about explaining that, yes, the device is much smaller, much cheaper than the big one, but it can still do the same images. It's something that is often unbelievable, yet true. So bringing that across is also part of the journey we engage with our customers.
Yeah. And touching on much smaller and much cheaper, I'm assuming you're overcoming one of the barriers of being too expensive, and potentially maybe developing this into a question on how much does your solution change the economics for smaller hospitals or neurology clinics compared to other big PET scans?
The price is one aspect. The even more important aspect, I believe, is the low burden on infrastructure. So no construction needed. If you tell people you can just roll it in the room, it takes 45 minutes to unpack, and then you can start calibrating and doing your scans, they just don't believe it. But it's true. Again.
Yeah, and I've seen one of your pictures of the device on a pallet, basically, just a very small size pallet.
It is very small. And here also one design that we had is we don't want any special power requirements. We want to have it 110 volt plug in the US, 220 volt in Europe. Same thing. You just put it there. If you can put a toaster, you can put our device. It
Yeah.
sounds a bit silly, but that's what's the target in simple
Yeah.
words.
So it's plug
And
and play, almost.
almost plug and play. Depending on jurisdiction, there's also very limited to no shielding requirements, which all
Mm-hmm.
makes it again adoption hurdle very low. And yet for the neurology offices, the de novo sites, if you so wish, it's of the essence that the hurdle to adoption is as low as possible. And that's what
Yeah.
we achieved with our device.
So you're currently in early commercialization. You've mentioned a site in the States, but I know you've added more. Can you please share with us some key milestones?
Yes. So we are basically aiming at three customer segments broadly. One
Mm-hmm.
is imaging centers. We have one installation there in Florida that is such a customer. They were looking to add capacity for brain scans, and they got a device of us installed. The second customer segment is neurology offices that have the patient, typically refer them to another center, but have a huge opportunity also for themselves in getting this in-house, not only for better patient care, but also for additional revenue streams. And then there are the academic hospitals, which is, in all honesty, a larger opportunity in Europe than is in the US. And here we just finished installation in Munich at LMU Hospital last week. So
Congratulations.
by that, I can say we have commercial validation in all of the three segments we have, which doesn't mean we stop. We have the next devices already scheduled for delivery both in US and Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and have also built a strong commercial force. So you might have seen that I've hired a chief commercial officer in September, very experienced person with a GE background, and also Jérôme Deschelder from France, and then also the VP of Sales, Brian Oswald, and they both work hand in hand with me to bring this really to the market. So also Jérôme and I, based in Europe, we spent about a week per month in the US each to develop this market.
The US market. Who would you say you would consider your main competitors? Would that be large OEMs? Are there any other smaller pet players?
Yes, so the large companies that do whole body systems, I would not truly consider competitors, but rather partners in a sense, as they both are also involved in the radiopharmaceutical business. And the application for a whole body system is quite different than for a dedicated brain system, in the sense that the whole body used for oncology, used for cardiology scan, where you actually need to scan the torso or the whole body looking for metastases. Whereas we open up a new market, which is neurology, which is actually a field that is growing because of the advent of Alzheimer's treatments. You need a lot more amyloid scans, and there are estimates that the PET market essentially can almost double because of that. And this is what we are here to capture as a blue ocean market. There are two companies that also do dedicated brain PET systems, one from Asia, one also from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We are the only ones that have approval both by the FDA and CE mark. Our image quality is excellent in comparison, so I believe it's good that there's competition. It's validation of that there is a market, and I'm also convinced we are very well positioned to capture a large share of this market.
Amazing, and obviously you are, as you rightly point out, the category leader and the maker of that category. So the first movers always benefit from being such.
Yes. There's a quote I like a lot from the movie Margin Call, where it's about, you can make a living in three ways. One is to be first, one is to be smart, and the last one is to cheat. When you cheat, you're left with being smarter or faster, and it's a lot easier to be faster than smarter.
Faster. That's a very good one. I'll definitely use that going forward as well. So a bit of interest on manufacturing, because obviously I'm assuming manufacturing this device takes a lot of components and logistical setup as well. How are you organized for that at the moment?
We have very early on taken the decision to work together with a CDMO, contract manufacturing and design organization, and are very happy to have partnered with an international corporation that does this service throughout the world. We're working with a plant in Sweden that has also made the first prototypes for us, so now actually has engaged in the serial production, which I think is also a huge advantage to have compared to companies that don't, because it gives us the professionalism and the scalability of a large corporation without actually being that then investing into the infrastructure, which is extremely difficult, expensive, and risky. And so by having that covered by a very experienced player that has also both the European certificate as well as the FDA for manufacturing, we are covered well. And they also have other sites throughout the world that if we, when we grow and then reach a certain stage, we could also consider going to multiple locations with them.
So that's a very good lead into my next question on bigger strategic outlook and future growth planning. So obviously you have the CE mark, you have the FDA, US and Europe. Which markets or regions are strategic priorities for expansion following this?
Yes. For the company in our stage, we believe it's very important to focus on certain markets, prove that we are good in those focus areas. And we have chosen the US as one focus area. We believe that at least 80% our business is there for now. And the other rest is in Europe. And in Europe also we are laser focused and have selected 5 countries that we focus on. Those being Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and the UK.
Amazing. It's a solid plan. And I know even from an investor's perspective, they always like to see repeat purchase and customers that are loyal before you move out to new markets as well.
Absolutely. The best customer testimony is one of the first customers buying a second or even a third device.
There you go.
And that's what we're working on. And hence I mentioned also, I put the emphasis on quality, because if we have a good quality, good reliability, good product, good image quality, that's what customers want. And that what our customers have seen and are actually given testimony to. And this is laying the ground, the foundation for the next phase, which will be growing that business to a large scale.
So talking about looking forward, I'm curious to poke your brain a little bit. Fast forwarding 10 years, what does brain imaging look like?
I strongly believe that in 10 years, brain imaging will finally be in the same position that oncologic imaging and cardiac imaging will be are now. So it started off with cardiology. Cardiology has to develop in a major field in the medical world. Oncology followed. So oncology is also huge in terms of diagnostics and treatment. And neurology is just about to start. And hence we are now at the beginning of a huge growth period, I believe, in brain imaging. So if I fast forward 5 or even 10 years, my expectation would be that brain imaging, neurology as a field overall will have arrived at the same level that oncology and cardiology has done in the past.
And just one last thing on the product, if you don't mind. Obviously, we touched upon the fact that you're focusing on Alzheimer's to begin with. What other diagnostics are you planning in the near future?
The good thing is that our regulatory approval covers already all current and future indications of PET imaging, so we're not limited by that. It comes with new radio tracers, and already now we have radio tracers. The glucose mechanism that I mentioned at the beginning can be used in many, many diseases, such as dementia, Parkinson's, epilepsy, traumatic brain injury, to get a better assessment on how the brain is working. And if we expand on the tracer side, you have dedicated tracers for amyloid, which is one type of protein deposited in Alzheimer's. There's tau, which is another protein that is also target of future drugs that can be imaged with PET with a specific tracer. There are amino acid tracers that can be used for brain tumors. There are other more experimental and research tracers that can be used to, well, in essence, better understand the processes and the functioning of the brain.
Running a business that's creating a product and going through regulatory process, I'm assuming is very different to running a business that's commercializing and selling. How do you as a CEO adjust to the change?
I like that question a lot. It is a whole new game running a commercial organization. And it's also a challenging one. Very transparent there. The R&D side of things, sometimes stressful and demanding. As a company, is quite linear, especially in MedTech. It basically comes down to investors invest, have a cash position, and then you burn that and creating value by developing the technology with a very clear final milestone in sight, which is the approval. In our case, FDA and CE. And then if you switch it now to a commercial organization, those efforts still persist, right? There's constant product improvement, industrialization ongoing, preparing for scalability. And added to that is many layers of complexity, both on the sales side. So we have to to have an organization that actually goes to customers, sells it, gets money. Once you have devices at the customer, you have to service them, you have to maintain them, you have to have a system in place that responds quickly, and the customers are demanding there. It comes back to the point of quality, reliability. And before even all that, you also need to produce the device. You have a third element of the company. It has to work hand in hand with sales and services, which is production.
Yeah.
And this, on the logistics side of things, it's obviously much more complex, and also on the financial side of things, because it's not only investor cash injection versus burn, but it's also forecasting of sales revenue, of service revenue, of cost on those two things as well, and manufacturing, which also involves capital that needs to be invested at a certain time and has a certain cycle. And getting that all right and plausible and also adjusting when needed is a very different challenge. Just on the pure mechanics side, on the people side as well. It's before working with engineers also, but now we're having very experienced sales leaders that need to interact with the existing team, with myself, the service group, with marketing, with production. And I'm proud to say that we have managed this transition quite nicely so far in our journey, which I think is also one of the things that makes us successful.
Yeah. So on that note, are you able to share how do you maintain company culture through the growth phases?
That's a good one. And also answering another part of your question, which I didn't answer yet, how do I personally cope with it? I think it's all about self-awareness, self-development, and growing at least as fast as the company does. So for me, my personal development is strongly correlated with the company development. Because that's what's needed to do. And at the point where I wouldn't manage to do that anymore, I would not be the right person anymore. So far, I'm happy to be, and I'm also very confident that I will be in the future.
I have no doubt, Jannis. I mean, I've been following you and Positrigo for a while, and I can see the progression moving in the right direction.
It does. And so maintaining the culture, I think it's all about also leading by example. Given that personal development, it's also important to cascade this to my team, to my management team, to my employees, and also explain them, be transparent with them on what the changes entails and why we do this and what will actually be the benefit down the road for the company. In the end, we are a company and we are customer centric from the beginning, as I said, and there are various degrees of customer centricity which become more apparent now that we have a lot more customer interaction and which are put much more at stake.
Yeah. And with that thought, what advice can you give to other young founders in MedTech, not only on team, but in general?
What advice? Well, talk to the customers early, I think is number one. I cannot say this often enough. Early, often, and repeatedly. And then decide on what you can realistically implement in your minimum viable product. On top of that, find good partners, which means on the engineering side, on the regulatory side, on the commercial side, on the manufacturing side, and test them early. So also with our manufacturing, we changed manufacturer after the first trial because we weren't happy with them. And because we did this early, we could still change it and didn't have a huge negative impact on our company operations by that. And so testing early, it's an engineering paradigm that is also true for the other things. Go out and test early, talk to people, get the feedback, implement it in time, and then you can iterate towards a better and better product.
And it almost means that don't be afraid to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes and correct them quickly.
It's okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It's very important to learn from them and take action.
Amazing. Talking about mistakes and corrections, if you go back to the early days of Positrigo, would you do anything differently?
Yes. I would do many things differently. I would do very few major things differently. I think, and I will elaborate on that. Changing things has two aspects. You can change things for the better, and you can also change things for the worse. Sometimes you don't know which one you do if you do implement a change. And so given the 4.5 years time to market that we achieved, I think that's a very good achievement. So it's actually a great danger if you change something there that you might end up in a worse position. So I'm carefully saying what I would do, though, is I would calibrate more on which things to outsource and which things to keep in-house. So I'll give you an example. We at first had the idea of outsourcing all mechanical engineering to an engineering firm, which we did, and which we're also very happy with the result. But we realized you also need there's engineering capability in-house in form of mechanical engineers. And then we corrected that and hired them. Other than that, I would probably talk to certain people even earlier and even more often to just be able to do those corrections quicker.
I think that's very good. And obviously from a perspective of where you are, you're running a successful business that's early commercializing and successfully. So it makes sense not to overthink and not to think that there would be many things to correct as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. And thanks for all of that. Maybe just as a closing remark, a personal question on sports. Do you follow any sports?
Not much. I don't have so much time for that, unfortunately.
Brilliant. Well, Jannis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all of it.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me, and looking forward to seeing you soon.